Let's get right into it. Number 10. Forks were once satanic. Picture this, you're at a medieval dinner party, and instead of politely twirling spaghetti with a fork, you're stabbing meat with a dagger like it's a Game of Thrones audition. Because in Europe for centuries, forks were considered basically the devil's chopsticks. Back in the 11th century, when Byzantine Princess Theodora Ducana rolled up to Venice with her shiny golden fork, people freaked out. Church leaders said it was an insult to God, because he already gave you perfectly good utensils attached to your arms. Fingers. Yes, using a fork was once literally seen as a sinful act, as if every stab of pasta was an open hand slap to heaven. It gets better. Priests actually claimed forks were a luxury of the wicked and would rot your soul, like the 1000s version of eating avocado toast. Imagine someone telling you, "Sorry, you can't use this piece of bent metal. God wants you to eat stew with your bare hands." Of course, people eventually realized forks were, practical. And now, centuries later, they're so normal we only notice them when they clatter on the restaurant floor, causing you to do that awkward, "Do I pick it up? Do I wait for a new one?" shuffle. But once upon a time, the very thing that stops spaghetti sauce from covering your entire hand was basically considered witchcraft. So next time you hold a fork, just know, you're casually wielding a once demonic artifact that survived the holy war of table manners. Number 9. Coffee was a banned drug. You think your boss is cranky before their morning latte? Try living in a world where coffee was straight up illegal. That's right. Our beloved bean juice was once considered so dangerous that rulers banned it across entire empires. In 16th century Mecca, coffee houses were popping up everywhere. People would hang out, talk politics, and actually stay awake through it all, which, of course, terrified leaders. The Sultan of the Ottoman Empire even banned coffee because he thought people were plotting rebellion between sips. Basically, coffee houses were the medieval version of Reddit threads, full of hot takes and mild revolution energy. Even the Pope once had to weigh in. In the 1600s, Catholic leaders called coffee the bitter invention of Satan, which, let's be honest, is kind of accurate if you've ever tried black coffee on an empty stomach. But then Pope Clement VIII tried a cup and was like, "Actually, this slaps. We're keeping it." So coffee was saved by papal endorsement. Now, instead of being the symbol of rebellion, it's the symbol of office life, overpriced Starbucks orders, and nervous twitches during Zoom meetings. And every time you down your third cup before noon, you're taking part in a ritual so scandalous it once had people fearing the collapse of society. So yeah, your caffeine addiction isn't a personal failure, it's historical tradition. You're basically a rebel with cream and 2 sugars. Number 8. High heels were for men. Before they became the ultimate fashion pain is beauty accessory, high heels were designed for dudes. That's right, gentlemen once strutted around like they were auditioning for RuPaul's Drag Race. Renaissance edition. In the 1500s, Persian soldiers wore heels to keep their feet locked into stirrups while riding horses. When Europeans saw it, aristocrats thought, "That looks powerful. I want that." So suddenly, men were rocking heels as a flex. Like, "Look how tall and fancy I am. Also, please notice my calves." King Louis XIV of France even made a rule that only nobles could wear red heels, because apparently, footwear needed gatekeeping. Imagine a bouncer at the club stopping you like, "Sorry bro, those crimson stilettos are for royalty only." Of course, somewhere down the line, men decided heels were too feminine, and women inherited them. Which is ironic, considering the whole point was to make men look more intimidating on horseback. Now the same shoe is the reason you can't walk across cobblestones without risking an ankle injury. So yeah, every time you see a guy make fun of women's high heels, just remind him. His ancestors wore them first, and they thought it made them look tough. Number 7. Umbrellas were mocked. Imagine strolling down the street in 18th century England, holding an umbrella to stay dry, and random strangers start booing you. No, not because you cut them off in traffic, but because umbrellas were considered a laughable, pretentious flex. At the time, people thought umbrellas were unmanly and pointless. Why protect yourself from the rain when you could just get soaked like everyone else? In London, men with umbrellas were heckled, pelted with trash, and even targeted by coach drivers who didn't want competition. Because umbrellas meant you didn't need a fancy carriage to stay dry. The cabbies hated that. One guy, Jonas Hanway, is famous for being the first man to consistently use an umbrella in public in the 1700s. He basically endured years of mockery so your modern self could walk to Starbucks without becoming a wet sock. Picture him walking proudly through London drizzle while people yelled, "Nice parasol, mate," like it was the sickest burn of 1760. Eventually, umbrellas caught on, probably because being drenched all the time is miserable. Today, they're so normal we only notice them when they flip inside out in the wind and make you look like a defeated Mary Poppins. But just know, carrying one used to be a brave, socially rebellious act. You weren't just staying dry, you were taking a stand against soggy fashion conformity. Number 6. Toothpaste was crushed bones. If you think minty fresh Colgate is gross after sitting open too long, you might want to sit down for this one. Ancient toothpaste recipes were less refreshing burst of peppermint and more sandpaper for your gums. The Egyptians around 5000 BC whipped up the first toothpaste using ingredients like crushed ox hooves, burnt eggshells, and pumice. Yes, actual rock dust. It's basically like brushing your teeth with gravel. Later, the Romans improved it by adding crushed bones and oyster shells. Some recipes even included urine, because ammonia in pee actually whitens teeth. Congratulations, science, you made dental care disgusting. Fast forward to the Middle Ages, and people were still using things like powdered charcoal and herbs. So while your breath might have smelled vaguely like campfire sage, your gums were probably bleeding like a low-budget horror film. Modern toothpaste with mint flavoring only took off in the 1800s. Before that, the closest thing you had to fresh breath was hoping no one stood too close. Next time you squeeze your neat little tube of fluoride paste, just remember, your ancestors were straight up scrubbing their mouths with rocks and animal bones like they were polishing medieval cutlery. And we complain when there isn't enough cinnamon flavor variety. Number 5. Toilet paper was trees. Literally. You think cheap two-ply is bad? Buddy, you don't know suffering. Toilet paper is actually a ridiculously modern invention. For most of history, humans wiped with whatever was nearby: leaves, moss, seashells, or, in ancient Rome, a communal sponge on a stick. Yes, communal. Don't think about it too long. The first mass-produced toilet paper showed up in 1857, thanks to an American named Joseph Gaiety. His sheets were medicated with aloe and sold as a health product. But here's the kicker. People thought buying paper just to wipe your butt was wasteful and weird, so most households kept using newspapers, catalog pages, or corn cobs. Yes, corn cobs. Suddenly, scratchy two-ply doesn't sound so bad. Does it? It wasn't until the early 20th century that toilet paper became the norm. And fun fact, one of the earliest advertising campaigns had to reassure customers the product was splinter-free, which means at some point toilet paper wasn't. So today, when you're annoyed at running out of Charmin, just remember, your great-great-grandparents might have been reaching for last week's newspaper or a handy chunk of corn. Comfort wasn't really part of the equation. Number 4. Eyeglasses were mocked too. Imagine putting on glasses today and having someone call you a sorcerer. Well, in the 13th and 14th centuries, that wasn't far off. Early eyeglasses looked less like sleek designer frames and more like two magnifying glasses held together with medieval duct tape. People thought wearing them meant you were dabbling in witchcraft, or at the very least, you were a weird nerd. In fact, monks who used them for reading were accused of being vain. Like, how dare you want to see the Bible more clearly? Glasses were considered a suspicious attempt to cheat nature, as if God wanted you to squint your way through life. Others thought lenses gave people unfair mental powers, which is hilarious considering most of us can't even keep track of where we left ours. It took centuries before glasses became socially acceptable, and even then, people mocked them for being unfashionable, like the medieval version of being told you look geeky. Fast forward to now, and glasses are so normalized that we literally invented fake ones just to look smarter. So, if you're wearing glasses right now, congratulations. You're part of a long line of accused sorcerers who eventually convince the world that being able to see isn't demonic. It's just practical. Number 3. Alarm clocks were people. Before snooze buttons, there were knocker-uppers. No, that's not a weird insult. It was an actual job in 19th century Britain. These were human alarm clocks paid to walk around with long sticks, tapping on people's windows until they woke up. Imagine some stranger poking your glass at 5 a.m. while you're drooling on your pillow. Some knocker-uppers even used pea shooters to blast dried peas at windows, which honestly feels like a better wake-up method than your iPhone's default alarm tone of pure existential dread. The best part? People actually trusted them. They were like, yeah, I'll pay a random guy to stand outside my house at dawn and poke me awake. Of course, the invention of the mechanical alarm clock eventually made the profession extinct. But think about it. Today we complain when our alarms go off 1 minute too early. Back then, you were literally paying someone to make sure you got out of bed, and they could just not show up. No refunds. No snooze. So, next time you groan about waking up for work, just remember, at least you don't have to pay a guy with a stick to throw peas at your window until you get moving. Number 2. Ketchup was medicine. That bottle of Heinz in your fridge? Yeah, it was originally marketed as a cure for indigestion in the 1800s. Before it became the champion of fries and burgers, ketchup was sold in pill form as a miracle drug. Imagine popping a ketchup tablet for your stomach ache and being like, "Doctor, I think I need a double dose with extra mustard." It started with Dr. John Cook Bennett, who claimed tomato ketchup could treat everything from diarrhea to jaundice. He basically turned your future hot dog topping into a snake oil wonder drug. People actually bought it, because medicine back then was basically a mix of guesswork and optimism. Of course, science eventually stepped in and ruined the fun. Turns out ketchup doesn't cure anything except maybe bland French fries. But by then, people were already hooked on the taste, and ketchup made the jump from pharmacy shelves to dinner tables. So yes, your comfort condiment was once considered literal medicine. Next time someone tells you fast food is unhealthy, just remind them, you're technically practicing 19th century medical tradition. Number 1. Sandwiches were scandalous. Imagine you're at a dinner table in the 1700s, and instead of sitting down with a knife, fork, and 12 fancy courses, you grab a slab of meat, slap it between 2 pieces of bread, and start eating with your hands. Congratulations, you've just horrified high society. The story goes that John Montagu, the 4th Earl of Sandwich, loved gambling so much he didn't want to stop playing cards for a proper meal. So he told servants to bring him meat between bread, something he could eat without leaving the table or getting grease on the cards. Other gamblers started ordering the same as sandwich, and suddenly, the world's most iconic handheld meal was born. But at the time, this was borderline scandalous. Eating with your hands was seen as lazy and uncivilized. Bread was considered low-class food, and aristocrats were supposed to dine with style, not scarf down a proto-Big Mac while rolling dice. To elites, the sandwich was basically the food equivalent of wearing sweatpants to a royal banquet. Of course, practicality won out. People realized sandwiches were portable, filling, and didn't require juggling cutlery. Fast forward a few centuries, and now we have entire chains devoted to subs, paninis, grilled cheese, and the eternal "is a hot dog a sandwich?" debate. Spoiler, yes, it is. So the next time you casually eat a PB/J, remember, you're carrying on a tradition once born out of gambling addiction, laziness, and a total disregard for table manners, which honestly makes sandwiches even better. That's all for today. I'll be making similar videos in the future. Subscribe to see them.